we all okay? Are we hungry? Yes? No? Maybe we can get pizza sent in. Do you want pizza? Crabs? Wraps. You just ate some wraps? I didn't even eat the wraps. I never eat the conference food because it's always awful. Except for this food. It's amazing. Paying it forward. This is me. If you look for me on Google, you find this guy, which is pretty cool, John H. Biggs. And also, if you look for me generally on Twitter, people tweet me because there's a mayor in London whose name is John Biggs. So whenever somebody tweets me and asks me questions about London, which I know nothing about, I always say that I pretend that I'm from Hogwarts and that the mudbloods will be destroyed or like Voldemort's coming back and everything, and it usually works. And I'm ruining somebody's life. See, this is the guy, this little guy right here, the little guy down at the bottom who's not me, that's the mayor of London. So that's the other John Biggs. So if you meet him, then tell him he's a jerk. Today we're going to talk about fintech, but first we're going to talk about meat, which is why I asked if you guys were hungry. So, throughout history, things that weren't quite expected happened because of other things that weren't quite expected. That doesn't make a lot of sense right now, but I'm going to describe it in detail. See the little dog up there in that wheel? See him spinning around? Up in the corner. He's hanging out with the lady up above, and if that dog had to go to the bathroom, the lady would get hit. That's called a turnspit dog. And for centuries, that was the primary method for spinning meat over a fire. You bred a dog, it was genetic engineering, you bred a dog that wouldn't poop so much, and you put him in a wheel, and he spun around a lot, really, really fast. And he spun the meat. Now, over the decades, they suddenly realized, why do we have a dog in a cage? And why don't we use this new thing called clockwork to control the energy usage that comes out of springs and weights and pendulums? And we can create a thing that's going to spin meat a lot more slowly. And we don't have to have a dog. We don't have to have a living animal above our meat spinning really fast and getting all its hair all over our meat, which I guess back then was fine. I guess maybe it was like a spice, delicious dog sweat. So they made these clockwork machines that could slow down the speed of a spring unwinding, and it would act just like the turnspit dog, only it was a machine. So a lot of people looked at this and they said, okay, well now we can spin our meat much more slowly. This was decades and decades and decades of this machine spinning your meat for you. There was even a bell involved, because when you got close to the end of the spring, it would ring and you'd have to go back and make your meat go faster again. And there are all sorts of exciting stuff. You can actually see the bell in this. This is actually an original spit system that was mechanical. But somebody else said back in the 1700s, why don't we use the technology to spin meat and put it into watches? And from that poor little dog spinning meat in a wheel, you essentially got the entire wristwatch revolution, the revolution of time, the discovery of longitude, better tasting meat because it didn't have dog poop on it, and the Apple Watch, I guess you could say. The street finds its own uses for things, is generally the story here. The folks who had the dog, they saw a piece of clockwork. They didn't know what to do with it. Clocks really didn't exist back when they were trying to do this turnspit stuff. And they figured out an interesting way to solve a problem that they had. And then they destroyed the dog, they destroyed their spits, and then they made watches. Here's an example of fintech, the street finding its own uses of fintech products. That's a card skimmer attached to an ATM. That's why I always touch ATMs when I go up to them. I pull on stuff because it's kind of perverse, but I enjoy it because I'm worried about that kind of thing. So today we're going to talk about these things. I don't think we have a lot of time, so I'll go through them really quickly. But I want you to imagine what's happening right now in fintech, specifically financial technology, because I'm into this now. The street is finding its own uses for things. And I'm not talking about Wall Street. I'm talking about you guys. I'm talking about entrepreneurs who are building fintech products in positions, in spaces that had no access to banks, that had no access to the process of moving money. Now all of a sudden, almost everyone can do it within reason. And banks are actually scared. So we have an agenda: blockchain, robots, financial app marketplaces, the underbanked, and then we're going to do some hugs. So we're all going to line up and we're going to get a big hug from me. It's going to get weird, but you guys are going to enjoy it. We could just stop the hugs if we run out of time. Blockchain. So whenever you think about blockchain, you think about this poor bastard. Or you think about Bitcoin, or you think about Mt. Gox, you think about drug dealers, or you think about people stealing millions of dollars, you think about ransomware. But what blockchain really is a system of absolutely confirming things are true. When somebody comes up to you, goes to your business and says blockchain, 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 just like that, that's a trap. What they're actually trying to say to you is that we're going to give you an access database that's a little bit better than your previous access database, and it's going to be really cool and blockchainy. What really needs to happen is they have to use the Bitcoin blockchain. The other interesting thing is that blockchain and Bitcoin, if you're into it at all, is about to go mainstream to a degree that I could equate to something like Linux. Linux came out in the 90s, even early 80s, I think it was. It was fun for a while. You couldn't even multitask in it for a little while. And then all of a sudden you can multitask, and all of a sudden now AWS, you can spin up instances of Ubuntu as quickly as you can essentially sneeze. And that's exactly where it's going. It's all going behind the scenes. And I think the guys at the end of this slide, this is investment in blockchain, the guys at the end of this slide are going to eat it all. So there's really not a lot of window for fintech plays in blockchain. But the important things to understand about blockchain is that the Lightning Network is going to speed things up considerably. Bitcoin is not illegal in most countries, depending on how you define illegal. Building your own blockchain, your own private blockchain, is like downloading MySQL and installing it for yourself and saying that you're like a database operator. And most of the noise about Bitcoin will go away. And you have to believe but verify the hype. I wanted to point this out. This is the coolest thing about blockchain. The biggest blockchain company right now, the biggest Bitcoin company right now, is 21, and they raised $116 million in investment. $116 million. So that's a lot of money, right? You'd think they got a flying car right by now that runs on Bitcoin. This is their flagship product. This is the best they could do with $116 million. God bless them. They got other stuff behind the scenes. This is like a point-to-point. If you have this Raspberry Pi with a fan on it, you can send money to other Raspberry Pis with a fan on it. But this is what, I mean, yeah. With this guy, I had a friend of mine who knows a lot about technology. He was excited about it. He bought the 21 computer. And he said to himself, all right, I'm going to give it a try. He fired it up, and he realized it's just a Raspberry Pi with a fan on it. This is the best they could do. So there's a lot of room for growth in this space. I want you to remember, AWS, all that other good stuff, AWS keeps growing. And what's that based on? That's based on a technology that was at the nascent stage that blockchain and Bitcoin is right now. So look into it. And I love this picture, so we're going to go back to this picture. This is it. This is really it. It's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous that somebody would give $160 million and then come out with this. At least they could do is put it in like a windowed environment or some garbage. But I guess you have Windows because that's text windows. I remember I did that back in, I think, high school. Robots. Everybody likes robots. I wish we had a timer up here, and then I would tell how fast I have to go. So what's happening now in fintech and in retail is robots are going to replace your people. Already, I think here in Poland, you already have like the McDonald's where the people are slowly being placed into machines that make them into the burgers, and then the machines are serving the burgers. Is that right? Or do I have that wrong? You can go to McDonald's, and they're killing workers and making them into burgers. Oh, ordering's automated. I thought, yeah, okay. We get a lot of weird news in the States. Ordering is automated. This is a automated retail system. You walk up to it, you say to the thing, I heard voices. You say to the thing, I need a jacket in large, and it gives you the jacket, and you hold it up, you try it on, it says, oh, that looks good for you, you want to check out, and they ship it to your house automatically. What this guy is trying to do, he's going to put this in airports around the world. You go up to it and you try it on. You don't have to have retail space anymore. Wendy's is doing the automatic ordering in the States. Now, Wendy's is, you've never had Wendy's, it's pretty bad, but there's a reason why you don't want to talk to the people in Wendy's. So I guess the robots are going to help. But the most important thing to understand, the most important thing about robots to understand is that little cars like this and trucks like this are about to change the world in a very, very real way. My partner, he always says the automation of jobs once held by young men will change the world. There are going to be billions of men, 18 to 36, out of jobs, because that's the vast majority of men are driving trucks, and they're driving generally, especially in the US. Once we have automated trucks, once we have automated cars, things are going to get really, really, really weird. Because the people who had jobs before, the people who could depend on a steady paycheck because they could drive somebody around, are not going to have that steady paycheck anymore. Financial app marketplaces. This is very exciting. Actually, this isn't very exciting. But I'll tell you a story. I was talking with this guy from Chase in Brooklyn. We were both on a panel or something. And I said, we have this idea. We're going to do like a chat app for banking, for like money transfer. You say, I want to send my friend $200 or whatever. And he says, oh, we already have that. And I'm like, really? That's really, I've never seen it. Yeah, you can SMS our server, and it'll tell you your bank account balance. So you can send an SMS to the server, and it'll say, like, thank you, your bank balance is $25. So he meant, in all seriousness, that the highest degree of technology in Chase was the ability to get a text message on your phone. So I'm not too worried about them solving a lot of problems. This is actually what I meant, where you can actually talk to a robot, and you could say, have I spent my budget today? Or how much can I afford this shirt? Or where can I buy this shirt more easily or more cheaply? That's an important thing. And further, you have all these crazy money-sending things. I'm doing one. It's called FreeMet. But we've moved away from the money-sending thing because it's very, very dangerous and very, very difficult. And these weirdos have decided to do it. They're from Russia, so they have no sense of risk. God bless them. Then you also have Yantra, which is a banking product which actually allows you to build applications on top of their bank. The bank becomes a layer of trust. The bank becomes a non-consumer-facing product, and it's really difficult for us to understand this because for decades, banks have tried to be consumer products. The bank is moving to be a non-consumer product. They become arbiters of trust, and they become sort of storehouses of cash, and all you have to do is basically tell the bank, I'm a trusted person, send this other thing to another trusted person that you know or your other bank knows, and you basically have a transaction that was almost impossible a couple years ago thanks to the blockchain. So all this comes together, including the dog who's pooping on stuff. Here's the underbanked. The underbanked are very exciting. I literally have no idea how much time I have, so I'll just hang out. Poverty is expensive. So the mass majority of people who are poor find themselves paying almost 10 to 20% of their income just on banking and on financial tools. So in this case, somebody who's earning $25,000 a year, which is fairly unusual in the States, but I can't imagine it's fairly unusual in some other countries around here, they spend about $2,400 on banking products. That's $2,400 that just goes into the trash can or goes into the banker's pockets. So as we grow, we have digital identity, we have transparency, we have simple credit, and we have more control over our money and the way our money moves. Obviously, Estonia is the leader in this. I could see Poland and I could see a couple other countries getting in on this pretty quickly. This is massively important. The ability to do this, to use a unique identifier to identify yourself on the network, is massively important for the underbanked all over the world. India is trying something similar. Further, one of the primary problems with money-moving systems and remittance systems is that the governments for a long time would look at these things and say, you guys aren't sending a lot of money to some dude named Osama bin Laden, are you? And they would say, no, we're just here working very hard. And they had no idea. There was no idea where you were sending a bunch of money to. And all the regulations, all the laws associated with remittances and money sending are related primarily to trying to prevent people from sending money to Osama bin Laden, which is actually very difficult now because he has a hole in his head and he's at the bottom of the ocean. That said, blockchain is going to allow us to do all sorts of exciting new things because what this does and what this adds to the fintech revolution is complete transparency. I know where the money went, I know who it went to, and I know where it went afterwards. So you can essentially follow it through a trail. Finally, you also have these ad hoc community systems. One of the interesting things that I've seen recently is a copy of an old system that they used to have I've seen it all around the world. You basically had one woman, or like a grandma, in an apartment building. And grandma would go up, you'd go up to grandma's house, you'd give her $20 every week. And every month, somebody would get all the money. It was basically an ad hoc loan system or an ad hoc savings bank that gave you a little bit of interest. Now that you have technology that can do this fairly easily, a app can be the grandma. You can put your money in, and everybody can access that money as necessary. It's a stash, and it encourages a sort of behavior that wasn't there before. It encourages saving behavior as opposed to sending behavior. All this garbage, all this check cashing, all this EBT stuff can all be done with apps, can all be done with digital identities. But the value of these things is you know what you're going to get. So if we can give a poor person a way to solve all these things inexpensively, I would wager that they would take it, because they like to see a certain amount of value for their money, and they also like to understand what they're paying for. If you tell them that they're paying for XYZ, then they're going to take it. They're going to spend a little bit of that $2,400 to cash a check or send some money overseas. And if we can improve that in any way, that's actually a real home run. Finally, let's see, here we go. So anyway, what this all comes down to is that fintech is changing the world. Banks are changing very, very rapidly. And if they don't figure it out, they're going to be essentially hosed. This slide, which is very difficult to read, says that the vast majority of young people today would rather go to the dentist than go to the bank. And they don't trust banks, they don't like banks, they don't care about bank brands. Banks are essentially becoming utilities. They're becoming arms of the government where you can pull money out and put money in. If they do not act, customers will abandon banks very, very quickly. And I would wager it's going to be about 15 years before you see a situation where something like a Chase no longer has a consumer angle, consumer brand, because apps have replaced all the features. So here's my advice if you're thinking about fintech. Who's thinking about fintech? Anybody cares about fintech? Yeah? Like 4 people. Why are you guys even here? I mean, it's the hugs. The hugs are coming. All right, well, here's my advice. This is very deep advice. You got to think, you got to prepare, you got to build, and repeat. Now, the important thing to understand is that most banks never did this. They're currently not doing this. They might be able to do this, but in a very, very kind of wonky way. And they definitely aren't repeating themselves when they try to do things. I have a buddy who works at a bank. His entire job is to say no to vendors. That's all he does all day long. That's literally he's the head of IT. So he's not building anything. He's kind of thinking about lunch, and he's definitely not repeating anything because all he does is he meets new people and they tell him to go buy a thing that does one thing. What's my time? Cut? Am I done? All right, so we're not going to have the hugs. So this is actually this was the original way that you would turn meat on a spit. Now you notice you don't want these dudes around your meat because they look sick generally. I don't know what, like the Black Plague or something like that. This guy, Abraham Breguet, he came by and he said to himself, "We're going to fix this. We're going to fix all sorts of amazing problems." And he built the most complicated watch in the world. So we went from a dog and a bowl in a wheel and some guys turning a stick to this, which I think is really, really cool. And I think we can do the same thing for fintech if we prepare and think and build and repeat. So we're going to stop the hugs. There's no hugs, I'm sorry, because Vitaly says I have to leave. But this is all my information, John Biggs, at John Biggs, John at FreeMit. And if you find me later, we can do a big old hug off. But thank you.